Now, ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome the next speaker talking about SharePoint win-win, driving value, productivity for IT and business users, Mr. Delvin Chu, Senior Client Manager from SharePoint Singapore. A big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Hey everybody, good afternoon. Welcome on down to the Satya Convention Center. First and foremost, my name is Delvin. I'm actually one of the team leads in SharePoint Singapore. I'm also the territory manager for SharePoint Malaysia as well, and all the deals that we do out of Malaysia. First and foremost, thank you everyone for inviting me to your beautiful country, Malaysia. Let me give you a little background. I've been in the IT industry for about 10 years, and I have a very special relationship with Malaysia. Every job I've been in has either required me to work here for a period of time or fly here regularly to meet clients, to meet partners. And I was just sharing this joke with some of my teammates yesterday over dinner. Every time I come to Malaysia, there is this one phrase in the local language, Bahasa Melayu, right, that I will use without fail. Without fail, okay? So what happened was, I was telling them about this, and then we went to dinner, it actually happened. So we was having dinner, we were at this nice restaurant, and the waiter came to me, and I think because I look a bit tan, he thought I was a Malay. So he started speaking to me in Malay. Right? And I used that one single phrase that I learned in Melayu. And that is, aku tak tahu Melayu, English boleh? And that's that one phrase that I use to get out a very single difficult conversation that I have. But of course, today, my presentation is not about the fact that I can't speak Malay. In fact, I'm going to be doing it in English, and I'm sure that's fine with everyone. But my main aim for my presentation today is to serve you, right? And to serve you in the sense of keeping in line with the theme of today's event, and that is digital transformation. Oops, there we go, right? Digital transformation, ladies and gentlemen, is a big, big word, and it means different things to different people. I fly around quite a fair bit and do presentations around Southeast Asia as well. So I can tell you, if I have this conversation in Singapore, I go to a customer, government or commercial accounts, and I say, and if I talk to a C-level person, I say, hey, what's digital transformation? They have this nice, big idea, you know, oh, I want my organization to be able to share information seamlessly, internal, external parties, and I still want to keep it secure. That's what a C-level executive will say. And then when I turn around, I go to the IT person, I say, hey, IT guy, so your boss has this big vision. How to do? No idea. Interestingly, when I go to other parts of this region, like for instance, Malaysia, when I talk to customers in Malaysia, the one thing I learned, Malaysian customers tend to be very pragmatic. And I'm not talking about this from the dollar and cents and the budgeting perspective, but what I'm saying is, they will act on something if there is a need, or rather an urgent need. In every organization, we always have a lot of needs, a lot of things that we want to do, but the moment that need becomes urgent, that's when my customers will act on it. I'll give you an example. We were talking to this shipping company that was on SharePoint Online, right? And they were a global company, Malaysia, one of the HQ. So everything was going fine until one day the global HQ sitting somewhere elsewhere said, hey, you know what, regional subs or local companies, you take care of your own backup. And suddenly it fell on the IT person sitting in Malaysia to be able to back up their data as frequently as on a daily basis. Why is that significant? Because on SharePoint Online, it's only up to 14 days based on Microsoft standards right now. The other customer that I was talking to recently, again, I cannot name this customer for every other reason, they had a security breach, right? And some data were lost. And then they couldn't answer the auditors accurately. And then that's how they actually came to us as well. As if digital transformation isn't difficult enough, in every digital transformation, there is two key actors. Again, I'm sure you guys are starting to wonder which are these two key actors. They are your business users as well as your IT users. All right, so a quick show of hands here. I won't ask you all to stand up, but how many of you here are business users? You lead a team, you drive business applications, you run line of business, you're from finance, you're from marketing or HR. Quick show of hands. Okay, couple of them. Thank you, I mean. How many of you here are IT users? Okay. And then the rest of you are just here for the lunch, right? No, I'm just kidding. So, knowing that digital transformation is difficult, knowing that there are these two actors in play, and let's be honest, I've been doing this for about 10 years now. IT and business users always get along, right? Who am I kidding? And let me give you an example of why making sure that these IT and business users are able to correctly identify what digital transformation actually means is so important. So, IT users, like I mentioned earlier on, very pragmatic. So I'll give you an example here. So in this picture that you see here, if you're an IT user, very standard, you call the vendor, you call me up. Hey, Delvin, I have these 3 at home. I want you to install something that somebody can sit on and it can go up and down. That's what you guys will say to me, right? That's what the IT user would go right down to the details, pinpoint exactly what is done. Fine. Vendor like FPoint will come in and say, okay, we'll discuss with you, we'll give you a code and all that. And then at some point, the IT users will say, but I cannot push this myself because I need the business user input. Every time when my IT customers say, we need to talk to the business user, I will start to sweat. Because something like this will happen. When you talk to the business user will say, I want something that can go up and down, but I want to have 3 levels. 1 level to sit on top, 1 level to put my leg. Right? I know I'm taking this out of context to make a joke, but in the IT landscape, it's very, very relevant. So for instance, if let's say the IT requirement was in this case was say SharePoint 2007 end of support, I need to move out of SharePoint, right? And that's how IT will approach it. But the business user will say, if I'm going to upgrade the version of SharePoint, by the way, I also work with external parties. Can you do something in SharePoint so that I don't have to send them whatever document they can all work on SharePoint? They always add additional requirements onto the basic requirement which the IT said. And how does this get solved? So here's the thing, it never gets solved. In most of the customers and organizations I work with, IT is all constantly working closely with the business users to solve it, but they never find a way to reach that common ground of what they think to be important. In Singapore, and I'm going to use, by the way, any Singaporeans here? Okay, good. I can talk candidly about Singapore. Every time when I engage Singapore, out of every 10 users, only about 2 or 3 of them where the IT and the business users really come together to define what digital transformation means. And it is these organizations that get the maximum ROI. Why do I say that? Because after we've ding-dong between the IT users and business users for a while, suddenly someone high up will come and say, hey, this one discussed very long already. Can we get started? Quickly, call an RFP, award vendor, start. And this is how IT will actually go ahead to document the project, which is an absolute nightmare. Let me give you an example. I was talking to a customer who had a SharePoint farm on-premise in Malaysia. And everything was fine, but basically one web part was broken. So that web part was actually allowing them to do things like some form of a booking system, booking the corporate tickets. And that portion was spoiled, and which is a very simple fix, something that we could do in 5 days. So I went to the customer, I said, hey, Mr. Customer, this is a really simple fix, I could do in 5 days. Can you please show me the solution document? And then the IT user looked at me like I'm from out of this planet. What is solution document? A solution document is where you actually document how the entire project was being implemented, not just from an IT perspective, but from a business continuity perspective. This one reason was the sole reason why it went from 5 days effort, and I had to increase that drastically and tell them it takes about 40 days because I had to redo a lot of the things which we didn't have the solution documentation from as well. Now, when the project is going on, this is what the business user end up being paid. And I love this picture. If you think about it, the requirement is still being met. It's still ferrying people up and down, but they build you a roller coaster, and they ferry more than one person, and they forgot about the tree. Right? A lot of times, because IT and business user can't come together, there is this huge divide, and as a result, business users end up paying more than what they really should. And more importantly, finally, when it's delivered, this happens. Okay, so in Singapore, we have a government agency that contracted us back in 2013 to do some more on CRM dynamics. So it's very interesting because when we started with them, 2013 was the latest version. That project was supposed to go for 9 months, but it ended up dragging for 3 years. Right? And by the time it went live, which is I think a couple of months back, guess what? There's a new version called CRM 2016. And we had this very difficult conversation with the customer. Congratulations, finally you commissioned your system, but now we need to upgrade your CRM. Right? So as you can see, and I see some of you smiling and nodding away in the room, these are problems that I think you face on a daily basis. Right? How do we address this? Because if you look back at these slides that I have here, in reality, what we really need, or what that organization really need, is something like this. I still make use of the tree. It is really simple to implement. It's not going to cost you as much as a roller coaster, and it will definitely do that before winter comes, as you can see over there. All right? So our key aim, and this is the why for FPoint, AvePoint, we really work with business users as well as IT users to focus on exactly what do you need, right? And again, we all have many, many needs. We all have many, many wants. How do you figure out which is the most important one to start on first in your digital transformation journey so that you can enjoy the maximum ROI as well? And the way we do it for AvePoint, we actually have our own set of solutions that we layer on top of SharePoint. We are also able to build consultancy services in terms of understanding where SharePoint, for instance, SharePoint 2016, if any of you are considering, how that can actually help your organization to achieve all the outcomes stated below as well. And I want to define when I talk about SharePoint. So in the course of my presentation, I will talk about SharePoint, I think about 200 times. Every time I talk about SharePoint, I'm talking about any flavor of SharePoint. On-prem, in the cloud, Office 365, SharePoint Online. I'm also talking about it in Azure. I'm also talking about it in hybrid. Everything that you see here actually works across these three platforms, all right? And more importantly, let me give you a quick introduction about AvePoint and who we are. So this is going to be the only slide where I'm going to talk about AvePoint. We are actually the Microsoft Cloud Expert. We are what we call a global ISV. ISV stands for Independent Software Vendor. We are headquartered in Jersey City. I'm from Singapore, where we cover Malaysia as a market. One of the key things that I want to do in this presentation, apart from serving you, is to do three things. First, I want to, in the course of my presentation, share with you ideas, thought leaderships. These are things that you can think about and have the conversation in terms of where to start your actual digital transformation. The second thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to try and do this correctly as well, is that I understand that there are two groups of users here, all right? So I'm going to be showing you use cases and scenarios across these two groups. I'm not here to sell you. I'm not here to sell you. Every time when you hear the thing AvePoint products, that's the only thing we're going to say. If you'd like to find out more information, please do join me at the booth outside. I'm happy to answer your question. And the last but not least, I'm going to try my best to answer as much questions as you guys have. Okay, this is very difficult for me because if you ask my wife, I cannot multitask. I cannot change the diaper and talk to her at the same time. So I'm going to look at the screen and try to present at the same time. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot it up. We will get to those questions, and I'll also have a Q&A session towards the end. I can pick a couple of questions or comments that you guys might have. All right? So at AvePoint, we have offices worldwide, and we have all these users on Office 365 as well, and we are a fully Microsoft shop. I thought I pause here to give you the full picture about what we're talking about in digital transformation. What you see on screen right now is leveraging SharePoint to be your end-to-end solution for your business processes. I had a chance to meet some of you at my booth earlier on, and I realized that generally it falls into two categories. One of you already have SharePoint. You are facing certain challenges with SharePoint. For instance, I don't know how much file I have. I have so much site collections. Which is the most popular site collections? Someone leaves the organization. How do I pass permission to that person? For this group of users who already have SharePoint, there are ways where we can make managing SharePoint a lot easier, driving adoption a lot faster as well. For those of you who are not on SharePoint, right, this is the time to have a think about why not SharePoint. Right? I won't ask you to raise your hands, but I'm willing to bet most of you here in your organizations have some form of file server. File server is the single most popular legacy system that I see. Right? And the sad thing for me personally is people use SharePoint like a very hyped up version of the file server. So whatever thing you see in a file server, it exactly exists in SharePoint. The only problem is SharePoint don't allow so many nested folders. Then they go how? So they actually just dump everything in. There is a better way to do that. SharePoint out of the box. And when I mean out of the box, I mean just installing SharePoint, you can already use most of the features. And that's exactly what I'm trying to show in this slide here, where we try to break it up into pieces on how to go on this journey to leverage SharePoint. And the first step is actually moving to SharePoint. All the paper-based documents that you have, all your documents in your legacy systems, how do you get it into SharePoint? Once you're already in SharePoint, how do you maximize the value of SharePoint? So I said earlier on that SharePoint has all those out-of-the-box features. So let me explain what I mean. If you go to SharePoint right now and you want to upload documents, share it with your team, with your project, you can already do that. I'm talking about doing more than that. How do you make business and IT users be part of the digital transformation? So that's what we mean by maximizing SharePoint value. And then we talked about leveraging productivity tools. One question I always get when people ask me about SharePoint is, SharePoint is very good for internal, but external, I use email. I'm here to tell you that that's not the best way from an organization flow perspective, as well as from a security perspective. So in step 3, when we talk about productivity tools, it's really to drive adoption and to address these specific use cases as well. And once you're done with all of that, so let's say you moved into SharePoint, you've done all your collaboration, you collaborate with external parties, that is where you will potentially use things like workflow, which is where my good friend in the next presentation, Andy, is going to come on and talk about using Nintex workflow to complete the entire process. And because he bought me a beer last night, that's why I'm beginning to pitch here as well. This is actually the end-to-end from SharePoint, moving into Nintex as a workflow angle, and even then getting legal acceptance, all on SharePoint. I'm going to pause here and ask you to think about how you are doing your organizations now. I'm pretty sure there is some form of hard copy document, there is some form of email. No, sorry, I should correct myself. There's a lot of form of emails. You send to external party, you worried the fellow around with your data, you do what? You sign NDA. Correct? And then when it comes to legal acceptance, you still keep pen and paper documents. Let me show you in the next couple of slides how we can potentially change that. And also to go all out and serve you, what I'm going to do is this. Okay, I've never done this before, so I'm going to try. Okay, we are going to try and do a presentation scenario. So recognizing that there are two groups of audience here, and I can't address two groups because I'm just one person, I'm going to invite a teammate on stage, and we are going to be presenting to you from both perspectives. From that of a business users, when you see me talking, and when you see my colleague on stage, he's going to actually talk from the IT lead perspective. The use case is assuming we're both part of the same organization, and we're part of a knowledge-based enterprise. Knowledge-based enterprise is a very fanciful word for saying we need to collaborate, we need to send things. We're not a doctor, we can't do it by ourselves. How does applying that entire journey, step 1, step 2, step 3 earlier on, help us to do our job better? And you all know, if you watch Magic Show, the magician always got a pretty assistant, but no matter what I do, he wouldn't wear a dress. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I just get you to give a round of applause and welcome my teammate YZ on stage as well? And we're going to get through the remainder of the talking points. Okay, sir? Your dress okay? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Ready?
Yeah,
Let's go.
ready.
One of the first steps that we talked about was actually moving into SharePoint. Now, for all the business users in the room, when you talk about moving into SharePoint, I know, because I'm also a business user, I switch off. Because moving into SharePoint, migration, not my problem, IT's problem, right? My question to all the business users in the room, after IT has moved, what happens to your current working document? What happens to the document that you are sending out via email? Somebody's got to put it into SharePoint. My challenge to the business user, why not you, right? Tell me if this is typical of your day. We do what we call collaboration by email. Okay, this one must tell story. So, person on top, he's a team lead. 3 people below in blue, they are actually the team members. Person on top wants to write a paper. I want to write a paper to submit to these 3 team members and ask them for their comments. I start typing something in the desktop, and once I'm done in the desktop, I copy from desktop, put inside email, and I send it out across to my 3 teammates in the office. Each of them receive it in their email. Now, at this point, if you think about it, there's already 5 versions of the same document, living in your teammate's laptop or in emails. Okay? Collaboration, right? So what happens is then the teammate actually copies the document from the email, put it onto the desktop, change some stuff, and then send it back to me. In that one cycle that I just described to you, there are 20 versions of the document. Okay, this is the classic. You know, you open your file explorer, then you got SRKK presentation final, SRKK presentation final, SRKK presentation super final, exactly like that, right? And many of you think this is fine. When we talk about, oh, I need to search the document. Do you search inside your desktop? No, you go to email and you find the last correspondence from there. As the team lead, I'm struggling. I suddenly got six copies of the document, which I need to integrate and collate everything into one piece. Let's say if I have more questions, and I do this one more round, there are 41 documents lying around somewhere. Now think about how this affects from a security and IT perspective. This may seem fine for you, but in a couple of years back, IDC actually did a study, and this is costing the organization $19,000 per knowledge worker per year. Every time when I meet customers and they say, I got and you know Singapore customer, we all very naughty. I meet the customer and say, hey, oh, we are FPoint, we doing SharePoint. Delvin, don't talk to me about SharePoint. Your SharePoint here called slow point, because always very slow. And I asked him, what do you mean by that? Users don't have permission. Users don't want to go and upload the documents in the correct place. You know, what if there was a way to do this better? Here is how. Next slide. So this is the email where we always go to craft our documents, to send, and in the picture earlier on, you see, you always start on a Word document and then you paste it onto the email. And as you're composing your email, what if I ask from a business user perspective? Next slide. You put in the name, in the CC list, you put in the documents, and what you would do at this point normally is you click send and you start that whole cycle that you just saw earlier on. But instead of clicking send, what if I tell you to move your mouse just a little bit higher up and click on this feature called Quick Share? Quick Share is an FPoint product that we have built to actually drive adoption. When you click on Quick Share, when you click on Quick Share, I haven't had lunch. It takes the file, put it into SharePoint. The people in your tool list and CC list can be configured to have read or edit access only, right? So what you have done is that you're telling the business user, as a business user, it's great for me because I don't have to go and log into SharePoint, find the correct team site, then after that realize try and upload, I got no permission. Right from the very tool that I use to craft my emails, I'm able to upload the documents directly into SharePoint as well. And I showed you one example, but in reality, you can even upload emails together with attachments into your OneDrive or your SharePoint site based on your organization requirements. The other thing that we spend a lot of time in is Microsoft Office. This is PowerPoint, as you all know, but I mean, it works on Excel and Word as well. You're crafting a PowerPoint presentation, and that's what exactly we did last night, but we weren't sending presentation across emails because attachment will blow up your email consumption size as well. As you're doing the slide, all you have to do is click the button on the top right, and immediately it does the same thing by taking the PowerPoint slides, putting it into SharePoint. And all you have to do is actually configure who are the to and CC lists, and you are actually able to give them permissions accordingly. Next slide. Right here, okay? So same approach. What am I doing? I am not asking you to save onto desktop, copy into email. I'm saying from PowerPoint, click a button, put it directly into SharePoint. Why do we make it so simple? Because we realize that complexity kills adoption, right? The background of this tool. This solution that you did was actually built by FPoint about 2 years back, and we built it for MAS. Sorry, I have to say this every time, not Malaysian Airlines. Monetary Authority of Singapore, where they had SharePoint farms, multiple SharePoint farms, but they were not being able to drive adoption because people didn't want to use SharePoint for the exact reasons that I actually talked about, okay? But I'm also very realistic. I understand that this is all about talking from the business user's perspective. At some point, you cannot run away from migrating from legacy system. And the reason why we call legacy is for two reasons. One, you don't know who owns it. Number two, it's usually very large. So my questions for the IT user in the presentation is, how can you do this easier?
Thank you, Delvin. So to effectively answer this question about how to migrate to make migration easy from the IT perspective, so we usually want to answer this question, I sidetrack a bit. From my 6 years of experience with working in the IT industry, I talk to a lot of IT users. So two of the things that I observe is the characteristics of IT user is first, they are very logical thinkers. So we look at things in a very systematic manner. We look at details. Okay, so why am I mentioning this? To a business user, like Delvin, sorry, what does migration actually mean to them? So they will tell you simple things like, migration is actually moving from point A to point B. Then after that, the next question, what do you need to migrate to SharePoint itself? You say, oops, everything. But this is not the case for IT user itself. IT users, there are a lot more considerations that we need to think about. We need to think about what is on the source destination. Are you on older version of SharePoint? Are you on Lotus Notes, Clicker, or some other form of legacy systems? Okay, and after that, we will need to consider things like, where are we moving to SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2016? What is the reason to move there? What are the kind of framework or features that we can leverage on? Where are we moving the files to? And what are we using to move the files? So all these are questions that are thinking in the minds of an IT user. So a good IT user will tell you that migration is not so simple. Planning takes up a large part of your migration effort. So there are actually 3 essential steps in a migration. The most common one that we are familiar with is the migration execution itself. This is a process where we migrate the actual content from the source to the destination. But in fact, there's another first step and second step. Step 1, we talk about being able to know what is in your existing environment. So we are talking about things like knowing what is compatible with the new environment. Do we have a tool to effectively discover what is redundant data? What data are duplicates, Like, for example, just now we were talking about email corresponding, different versions of file. Do we just want to migrate one version, or we want to migrate up to a certain version of file? Okay. Step 2, after determining what are the important files to migrate over, it's all about business classification. So you want to be able to document all the different contents to know which part of SharePoint you are moving on to. Okay, so to give you a very good illustration about this, we are talking about, take for example, this company that we did a migration for, they have 40 terabytes of information in their existing legacy system, maybe be file server, Lotus Notes, etc. So after the first step of discovering what is within their existing environment, they took out a sum of, so 10 terabytes is actually minus away from the existing migration equation. Then after proper documentation, classification of what they want to migrate, actually what they realize is they only need to migrate 4 terabytes of information to the new environment. So what does it mean to the whole organization at the end of the day? With proper migration planning and migration itself, we can actually reduce the amount of content that needs to be migrated. This saves on cost. And of course, at the end of the day, when you go into SharePoint, you are looking at being able to search information effectively. So business critical data and classification actually enhance all this search when you move onto your new platform. It actually helps to make business users happy because they can find what they want quickly and easily. Okay? So same thing, simplify the housekeeping process and using a tool to migrate. So from a point of view, usually we approach migration in a 3-pronged approach. The first approach, using a discovery tool to find out what is in your environment. Second, being able to deep search into your existing content and label and classify the different kind of contents you want to. HR content, corporate comms content, marketing content. Then at the end, when you move to the new platform, restructuring, scalability, all these are made effective. Okay, so after migration itself, we will talk about, you have all your contents on board. Now your users come in, how do we maximize the value of SharePoint? So this brings me to my second characteristics of all IT users, most IT users. The second characteristic I want to say is IT users are mainly problem solvers. So after analyzing the situation, they will want to find the best way to solve a certain issue. Okay? Having said that, this is the usual scenario that we see in our email inboxes when we move to a SharePoint environment, for example. For IT users, they study very hard. they try their best to be good at what they are doing. But at the end of the day, what happens? They will need to spend most of their time, up to 80% of time, servicing business user requests. So what are some of these requests? We talk about being able to grant permissions to users. Okay, I got this stuff living, can you remove his permission so that we don't fail the audit requests and stuff like that? Or I need a new site. Can you help me create a new site in SharePoint? I don't know anything about SharePoint. I just want to use it for my document repository, things like that. So what happens over here is, after working so hard to get our IT degrees and such like that, what happens is we are majoring on all the minor stuff. So what happens is we see a lot of people leaving the organization at the end of the day. Okay? So why not think about it in another way? Why not you try to think of some ways to automate all these different things to increase your ROI in your new SharePoint or Office 365 environment? Okay? Why not take whatever you can do on SharePoint and make it into a service catalog that is reachable to all your end users? So what this means is it's empowering your end users to be able to do what the IT users are doing. Okay? To walk you through a very simple workflow. For example, user A and user B wants to create a new site want to provision a new site on SharePoint itself. What they need to do is just fill in a form, send the request to IT itself. IT already have this process automated on SharePoint. Okay, what I need to do is just with a single click, approve or reject the request based on what they have written in the description itself. And after this, the system itself, the tool itself, will actually automate the site provisioning itself. So this is where you get the new site created. And within this new site, they can have groups, permissions assigned to various group, various individual users. All things done within a single click. Okay, so these are some of the requests you can see within your automation interface. For example, creating your site collection, assigning permission, moving content. So these are the day-to-day jobs that now IT can free up and look at to increase productivity within SharePoint. So having said so much, why not we take a look at what is it like on the business users end?
We love it. I'll give you an example out of Singapore. We had a property developer based in Singapore. It already had SharePoint. SharePoint was working fine. One problem, nobody wants to use it. So we asked them, we said, can we talk to the business users? Set out in the business users, interview the business users. Do you not use SharePoint? Are you familiar with SharePoint? Yeah, they're a pretty young bunch, so they're more IT acceptable to new IT practice and measures. And then we kept asking questions. We couldn't figure out why. Until the end of the day, when we finally sat down with one person for coffee and he went, you know why we don't like to use SharePoint? Because every time I use SharePoint, I have to create the permission. And when I create the permission, I got to go and talk to IT, and I don't want to talk to IT. Okay, because they will either forget about it, or I'll have to keep chasing. From a business user, as what YZ has already talked about, this fully empowers us to be able to request or self-service, asking the IT for the requirements that we need, allowing us to respond better to the business needs. And as a business user, I talk English, I cannot talk tech. So if you ask me the permission you want read, write, access, I don't know. All right? But through the self-service catalog, all the business user has to do is choose. So in the next slide, you will see that business users just have to input a few fields. IT can say read, write, read only, and all the business user has to do is to be able to click and submit. And this is perfect because every business groups then get tracked. So for instance, as IT users, and I'm going to sidetrack a bit, for the IT users, all business users are not created equal. There will be one joker business user that will take out all your time, and there will be all these other people that only visit you occasionally. With an automated service catalog like this, you can actually track and even cost back to the individual departments. Now, while this empowers IT at a digital transformation level, there is a lot more ROI to be gained. Let me give you an example. Say I am the head of a particular department. We went for a management retreat. And in the management retreat, I get an email from my big boss, the CEO, and says, hey, Delvin, I want you to spearhead this task force. Your task is to look at knowledge management, SharePoint collaboration, and making sure people share information correctly. Now, as the business user, I want to impress my boss, as we all do. I will make sure I get started on it. Now, what's the worst way to get started? To go to IT and ask for a bunch of approvals on SharePoint because you want to share information and you can't. This process of a self-service catalog allows me to move faster, to be able to achieve the objective, and yet from an entire organizational standpoint, ensure that I have compliance and audit and all that readily in as well. All right? So think about how this will empower your organization to be able to collaborate and move a lot quicker. Okay? Last but not least, extending the use of SharePoint. So at this point, I'm going to call a pause. Okay, no questions. Good. Either you all understand what I'm saying or you all fell asleep, but I will press on. We've talked about the first two steps, moving into SharePoint, getting off legacy data, be it for an IT user, for a business user, putting your working documents directly into SharePoint. In the second step, yes, when you're already in SharePoint, all of SharePoint's out-of-the-box features, which means your list, your document library, your project site, you're already enjoying that. We talked a little bit about maximizing it further, building the bridge where business users and IT users can actually maximize the use of SharePoint. And now I really want to talk a little bit, just to close off, extending that use beyond SharePoint. Let me give you a scenario. People always say that I do all my collaboration in my SharePoint, all right, which means in what you've just seen, I open my Word, I come up with a document, I put it into SharePoint, I share with everybody. Okay, this is the final document. Now I'm going to share it to an external vendor. What do? Put inside the email, and I sign out. And once you put inside the email, whatever you saw right at the start of the presentation, that email ding-dong, that happens. But with external parties, there's one added risk: security. When you put documents into an email and you send it out to an external party, how can you guarantee the party will not do anything they shouldn't do with the document? What we are proposing here is driving external collaboration even through SharePoint. So you see on the left, this is actually your internal departments all working on SharePoint. Through one of our F-Point solution, you can then decide by sharing that particular file or folder, which I'll show you some screenshots, to the supplier who is not part of your organization. All the time, giving you, number one, full control. Number two, giving you oversight, which means you know when he downloaded it, you know when the external party read it as well. And then thirdly, being able to revoke this access at any point in time that you need. So all it takes is just a simple click of the button in the next slide, where either from your SharePoint site, your My Drive, you actually share a single file, or you do the reverse where you share an entire folder. So why does sharing an entire folder work? I won't ask you to raise your hands again, but how many of you here actually use Dropbox? You're actually taking your data, putting it in someone else's server, right? What if I told you they could put it into your SharePoint? How much more secure is that as an option for your organization as well, okay? So, next slide. Yeah. And this is what I was talking about, where you can share the entire folder. And I also want to land just one last point, where we talked about you being in total control at all times. As a business user, bear in mind, this is a business user, I can, through selection of a few options, decide the kind of permission level, and more importantly, take away the rights and set the particular expiration time so that the vendor or the external party can no longer access the information as well. This is really pushing the edge of what SharePoint can do, and we've even put it onto the mobility device. So we actually have a native app for this application in the next slide, where we actually use it for the US military. So all the documents you have on SharePoint appears on the app, but because it's a mobile app, there's two-factor authentication. There is, location-based services. So if you're within the army camp, you can access the info, but when you're out of it, this app will realize that you're out of it from the location-based services and disable access to that. I say all this just to tell you how productive you potentially could do, even as a business user on SharePoint. The question to an IT user, now that SharePoint is all up and everybody's using, how do you continue to be productive in your day-to-day job?
Okay, thank you, Devin. So, question back to me again, how do IT users want to address productivity over here? So a quick recap on some of the characteristics that we talked about IT users just now. We talked about us being a logical thinker. Second one, problem solver. But that doesn't mean that we are a geek or a miracle worker. We don't create miracles with no help at all, okay? We still need the tender loving care of working with the correct vendors, working with the correct tools to help satisfy not just productivity, security as well. So take, for example, we talk about audit and reporting. Using, of course, native SharePoint and native Office 365 out of the box, you can already provision reports out to your business users. But are all these readable, editable for your business users itself? Do they understand what are within this report? How about thinking from the other end of being able to craft out customized reports that are relevant to your various stakeholders, even to your auditor team? Where they can take this immediate report and certify that, oh, I know who did what at what time, I know who has what permission. Okay? This is one of them, having report generated on a scheduled manner. And all these reports are sent to the correct stakeholder. Secondly, we talk about administration. IT, we always need to do a lot of administration on SharePoint. SharePoint is also known as a clicker system. What I mean by a clicker system is you need to click into every different site collection, document library, different sites, different subsites, in order to manage all the different configurations and permissions itself. So, thinking from using a tool perspective, we are looking at using a tool with a centralized interface for you to immediately access, select the different site collections or different libraries that you want to configure or put your access control on, and edit everything from there. Okay, and so from the tool itself, you can also look at cleaning up date accounts, putting temporary permissions to users. And of course, not forgetting enforcing policies as well. This is something new to most of our users on Office 365. Take, for example, HR has certain policy guidelines that they want to safeguard. But there will definitely be these users who has permission to their HR site, but they accidentally delete these important documents. So having a policy enforcer will actually help you to replace and stop people for accidentally deleting all this information. Because we all know, usually in SharePoint, what we are afraid most of is not people hacking into our system. It's internal errors, where people accidentally do things, accidentally leak information out. So having policy enforcer is a preventive measure. We can help to stop all these things. Last but not least, backup and restore. This is where we talk about basic needs of data protection. Being able to back up and restore from a full platform level down to granular level by documents. We do not want to have a case where after I need to restore a certain documents, all the other documents in the same site collection gets reverted back to the older version as well. Okay, so when we're talking about data protection, okay, it brings me on to another topic, ransomware. I believe that this morning there's actually a talk on using certain preventive measures to safeguard against ransomware itself. So as you all know, ransomware means that they encrypt your file, then they call you one fine day and say that I encrypt your file. To unencrypt your file, you need to pay me $5,000 for me to unencrypt them. Okay, but how to recover immediately after you engage this kind of scenario? Using backup and restore as a second line of defense against this kind of cases, we actually have a reactive measure that you can use immediately when you run into ransomware attacks. Okay, so what it means is, run into ransomware, what I do, I go back to my backup and I restore directly the copy that I have backed up on the previous day. And by that means, it means I can continue my same business function and I do not lose out on productivity. Okay? So, having talked about all these visions, different things that from the IT perspective, from a user perspective, from security and compliance, okay, I think I will let Delvin take back the mic to recap on what we have talked about today.
Thank you very much. I have a question there. I'm going to get to that in a bit. But just to quickly summarize what we talked about at the start, digital transformation, big word, big term. I think the challenge is on IT and business users to come to an understanding, to define something that can give them the maximum ROI. In AvePoint, next slide, our why is that we work with both business and IT users to find what's that one single change, one necessary change that can really drive the digital transformation for your organizations. We do it through consultancy, we do it through our solutions as well. And I promised earlier on that I'll take some questions, so I'm going to try and answer this question right now. How do we explain to business users the difference and benefits of using OneDrive versus SharePoint? So to whoever who posted this question, I'm going to answer you what I think based on now, okay? But I'd like to have a chat to understand more about your internal process. So really, my answer to your question is don't bother. Don't bother. If you go talk to a business user about OneDrive and SharePoint, they will just go, how does this help me do my work faster so I can go home earlier? Right? Instead, the way we approach business users is understanding their processes, okay, and making it easy for them to adopt. The mindset that I tend to tell people is, OneDrive is like, I open my house, come onto my house and have an invite. You don't know what's inside unless you come in or unless I let you in. SharePoint is like a whole street of houses where everyone knows where everything is. As an organization, you're able to share information, you're able to search information a lot better. So this will be my initial answer to that. But of course, I recognize that no answer is always easy and we'll probably need to discuss more. Please do come by our booth later on. Happy to have a chat with you. Finally, I want to call on the slide this particular image that I want to leave you with before we transition to the next speaker, my good friend Andy, who's going to talk about workflows. We talked about leveraging SharePoint end-to-end. We've covered, no, later than laugh. Okay. We talked about leveraging SharePoint from an end-to-end perspective. I covered the first 3 steps, moving to SharePoint, getting the most out of it, sharing externally as well. Let's close the loop. Let's say that document that you collaborate with is now ready to be sent for approval by management, all right? Please don't start pasting into email and send. There are ways where you can get an approval all done within SharePoint through the use of Nintex. And do please stay with us for the next presentation, who will actually talk about it more as well. And finally, just for laughs, I always show this to my customers, okay? Tell me what's the first thing you see. I always show this to customers, especially in this part of the world. Yes, I know budget is everything, but budget cannot be your only concern. Work with vendor like us to figure out what exactly is it that will give you the maximum ROI. you are a very friendly audience because I see many of you all smiling. In Singapore, when I show this slide, somebody challenged me and say, so Delvin, is F point the one on top, you see the dragon thing, or is it the one that's being tattooed? Okay. So my answer is twofold. When you implement SharePoint, it's a bit like doing a tattoo. It's very painful going on, and if it doesn't look nice, that's it. You're stuck with SharePoint for quite a while. Right? My answer to you is that working with F point, we will try and understand what your goal is, which is that big fanciful phoenix. We will then apply our consultancy to run it by technical constraints, by budget, by timeline, to implement a portion of it that gives you the maximum ROI, all knowing that at the end of the day, you want the phoenix at the end of the picture. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you very much. Do come by our booth at the end of this presentation as well. We're located just outside, and we'll be doing a lucky draw. Okay, so later on in the break, for those of you who have not dropped in your name cards, please come by. We are giving away vouchers, Paksan vouchers in Malaysia. Okay, and we're giving away Fitbit as well. So please do make sure you stop by our booth and say hi, and I'd love to hear from you. So on behalf of YZ, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Delvin, Mr. Yuzing Xiao. Thank you so much.